1. For the last 10 years, you claimed there was no board to answer to. When did that change? Was there always a board? Were you lying? No, I did not lie. What? I'm sorry. I can't believe somebody traced the ledger transaction to the food. It says on December 20th, 2022, Riot Games chief financial officer sent an initial proposal for Riot to potentially acquire Intrepid, contemplating a total Riot investment of approximately $250 to $500 million. I just want to add some super important context for this video before we continue. On April 14th, Sharif submitted 400 pages of legal documents, including declarations from other individuals, along with over 40 exhibits to add credence to the claims and statements he's now strongly asserting, that include him being coerced by the board of Intrepid Studios into signing documents, that Robert Dawson and Jason Karamanis threatened his and his husband's life, that the board wanted to lay off employees without giving them the money they're owed, and much, much more. Now, the 400-page nuclear bomb is actually filed as a motion for a receiver, which from my understanding is incredibly out of the norm, as most motions for a receiver through the court are 20 to 30 pages long. It's unclear how the judge, who seemed to already be annoyed with this case, will react to that, but we will see. As for what a receiver is, it's basically a neutral third party appointed through the court to protect and manage disputed property, which in this case would be Intrepid Studios and whatever assets it may have. We actually see a mention of the negotiations between the two sides over who the receiver should be, how the receiver should be paid, because receivers aren't free, with a CPA named Howard B. Grobstein being mentioned as a possibility. I don't think it's possible to compress all of the raw information into just this one video, as we had spent 9 hours live streaming just going through it all. Instead, I want to make the information easily digestible for all of you, so we'll have multiple videos covering the important parts of the 400 pages. I've already included the link to Stephen's public statement, and the full 400 pages of the legal documents you can view for yourself in the video description down below. In this video, we're going to cover the public statement Stephen has issued on Reddit and in the official Ashes Discord, along with some other tangents, such as the board's law firm, implying Stephen is paying his law firm Withers Bergman with stolen Intrepid money, and the public response from Riot Games about their past consideration for buying Ashes of Creation. We're also going to be covering alleged pictures or screenshots from the Ashes Discord server of Stephen sharing images of things that people have linked to the Intrepid Studios ledger that we published recently. I will note that during our 9-hour live stream, Sharif himself again came by to thank me for my coverage, which again is sending me mixed signals, considering he is still talking about me being a compromised mouthpiece for his legal opponents to people in the official Ashes Discord server. We are also mentioned, Chad and I, we were mentioned in the legal files in regards to two YouTube videos entitled Ashes of Creation Investor Responds to Stephen Sharif's legal victory, with the date, timestamp, and everything. We also have Stephen Sharif's worst nightmare comes true on Valentine's Day. I've included the filings exhibits, including text and emails, as well as witness statements at the end of this post. They will shock you, but they are a true and accurate account of what occurred to Intrepid and why. I know the public discourse around me, Intrepid, and Ashes of Creation has been flooded with knives-out narratives, driven by a coordinated defamation campaign, I think that's going to be hard to prove, orchestrated by the opposing parties in my lawsuit. That campaign has been amplified through content creators, including those serving as a mouthpiece for Jason Karamanis, a known violent individual with multiple prior arrests. I think some people in my Discord server looked Jason's record up and they couldn't find anything since 2000 or something. Do not mistake noise for truth. If you genuinely care about what happened to Ashes of Creation in Intrepid Studios, and this is not directed at the casual observer, I ask that you take a moment to read today's court filings. In them, I have included more than 45 exhibits consisting of texts, emails, internal communications, and witness testimony from 6 individuals. I think that lends it greater credibility for sure to Stephen, with first-hand knowledge of the events as they unfolded. I understand that creators can be easier to consume and more entertaining to watch, but some are chasing headlines and clicks, not accuracy, context, or the truth, which can only be found reliably in court. Over the past several weeks, I know many of you have been trying to make sense of what has happened to Intrepid Studios and Ashes of Creation. I have seen the speculation, the confusion, and the deliberate misinformation and defamation campaign designed to exploit all three. You deserve clarity, you deserve facts, and you deserve to hear directly from me. I have remained focused on addressing these matters where you can be certain the truth is actually verified in a court of law. After the April 2 hearing, today's filing, and the submission of declaration and exhibits that expose what was really happening behind the scenes, it is important that I speak plainly to our community. The hearing on April 2nd made one thing unmistakably clear. When the defendant's conduct is dragged out of the shadows and placed under judicial scrutiny, it does not hold up. Okay, so I feel like I need to make an actual fact check clarification here. I don't know what he's referring to here in terms of the conduct being dragged out of the shadows and stuff like that. It was factual that the judge found the Article 9 foreclosure on Intrepid and the movement of assets from Intrepid to TFE problematic. But they reversed the Article 9 foreclosure, put it all back in Intrepid, and Stephen Sharif lost the request for a preliminary injunction, which dissolved the temporary restraining order in favor of his opponents. He also got his motion to dismiss the legal counsel of his opponent dismissed, so he kind of lost on 3 counts there. I'm not exactly sure if he's saying, okay, that the Article 9 foreclosure being problematic is still an issue here because it's reversed. Yes, that was problematic, but that's all gone now, right? So I just want to make that clarification. I'm not sure if he's trying to skirt the facts here where he lost in the April 2nd hearing, unfortunately for him. As alleged in our federal complaint and further supported by the sworn declarations and documentary evidence now filed with the court, the board defendants, led by Chairman Rob Dawson, engineered a plan to seize control of Intrepid's assets for their own benefit through threats, coercion, deception, and unlawful self-dealing with zero regard for the company they destroyed and the human lives damaged by their illegal conduct. That plan involved starving a viable company of cash to manufacture a default, using fear and leverage to force signatures and concessions, terminating more than 200 people while stripping them of wages, benefits, and accrued obligations, leaving vendors and creditors high and dry, and then using the crisis they created to justify a foreclosure designed to transfer Intrepid's assets and intellectual property into an entity controlled by Robert Dawson. I think the biggest claim here is definitely not just the coercion and the potential the legalities of trying to take over Intrepid, but also I'm not sure, assuming that the general ledger that was provided is what we have so far, based on the numbers alone there, I don't think Intrepid Studios was ever a viable company of cash without the cash injections from lenders, investors, and other creditors. So that's going to be interesting to see in court if they filed an exhibit for that. And yes, the evidence now before the court goes even further. Great, that's perfect. The recently filed exhibits show what appears to be a premeditated attempt to defraud Commerce West Bank by failing to notify them as a senior secured lender of the foreclosure, while simultaneously maneuvering to redirect valuable Steam receivables out of Intrepid and into defendant's newly created entity. That is not my rhetoric. That is what the texts, emails, witness testimony, and internal communication show as exhibited in today's filing. So I mentioned earlier the Article 9 foreclosure was seen as problematic, and I think the judge also found the fact that they didn't notify Commerce West Bank being problematic as well. So I think that's what he's alluding to here. The court has already addressed the foreclosure conduct directly. The defendants argued that the Article 9 sale was proper, but I am not convinced. This is from the March hearing. I find that it violated, or I believe that it violated, the California Commercial Code in a few ways, including the failure at the core of the scheme. Notice was not given to the Commerce West Bank, senior secured lender. What happened next tells you everything. Okay. Just days before the court was expected to grant injunctive relief, the defendants abruptly reversed course and attempted to undo their own foreclosure. They did not stop because they discovered morality. Okay. They stopped because they knew they were about to be judicially stopped. They tried to put the assets back after the theft was exposed. They didn't try, they did it. The court also recognized the damage already done to Intrepid. Intrepid has already suffered harm to its business and reputation from the likely unlawful Article 9 foreclosure and sale of its assets to TFE. I think this is still the March hearing. Where's the mention of the April 2nd hearing? That harm is real. It is not theoretical. It was inflicted on developers, vendors, creditors, investors, and every member of this community who has spent years believing in Ashes of Creation. What many of you have also been subjected to over the last several months was an orchestrated public defamation campaign pre-planned by my opponents to poison public perception, isolate me, and depress the value of and strategic partner interest in Intrepid so that the assets would wind up with one person, Rob Dawson. So I'm going to address this from my personal standing here with the whole orchestration. Again, as insinuated by some people, including Steven, I'm not being paid or coerced or whatever to cover the information that's given to me by sources. In fact, apparently me releasing the ledger actually pissed off some of those sources. So there's no orchestration there if somehow I'm like throwing a wrench into all these orchestrated plans to defame Steven or defame Intrepid Studios. All I'm doing is just publishing information once we verify it and all that to the best of our ability. Okay, so they believed if they controlled the narrative, they could control the outcome. They were wrong because I have the receipts, I have the texts, I have the emails, I have the internal documents, and the people who were present and aware of exactly what these individuals were doing while they lied publicly about it just spoke up in today's filings. Yes, this may become one of the craziest stories gaming has ever seen. I agree. I think it's already an insane story, guys. I'm just saying that right now. It may certainly be one of the most disturbing stories in MMO development. Yeah, I think there's no one that doesn't agree. But it is not fiction. It is documented. For nearly 2 years, I tried to keep the peace. I did so for the sake of my team and their families. I did so for the millions of players waiting for Ashes. I did so at the expense of my own health, my own safety, and my own peace of mind. I attempted to comply where I could, compromise where I could, and hold things together where I could. But there is a line, and that line was crossed when their conduct showed complete disregard for the human beings under my leadership. When hundreds of loyal developers became collateral damage, when wages and benefits were weaponized, when fear replaced stewardship, when greed replaced purpose, when they decided they could destroy what others built and simply inherit the remains. They unconscionably threw 200 plus families' lives into chaos, shattered years of work, damaged the value of the company and project, and believed no one would have the will or resources to challenge them. I'm going to make my own statement at this point. I think as far as the employees needing to be compensated and paid for, I find both sides on this legal case to be at fault. I'm trying to understand this from my point of view. Okay. I'm seeing Steven Sharif, a purported millionaire or billionaire gamer, not giving money to the employees that he considers as his family. I'm also seeing the board and their investors, or whatever, also putting massive cash injections into the company, and they can clearly afford to pay the employees or compensate the employees. Why aren't either side doing that? Personally, I think for me, what I would like to see as a consumer or former Ashes of Creation player is first and foremost the employees to be paid and compensated. And then everything else after that, everything else can come after that, in my opinion. That's gonna be my statement here at this point, because it's like, okay, you're talking about your 200 plus, family of workers and employees that you've known for years and years, but like, what? No one's taking care of them. No one's taking care of them. Whether it's the billionaire, millionaire gamer called Steven Sharif, or the board with tens of millions of dollars to spare in terms of investments, as far as we could see from the general ledger. No one's taking care of the employees. So I find that this in itself
No, I didn't forget. Nephis,
is kind of like using the employees. I think two of them, according to a source, are like needing critical medical treatment. Why are you using the employees as a shield here in this argument? I think in that regard, I think both sides need to like actually take care of the employees. I think they're both in the wrong for not having compensated employees thus far. Okay. That was a serious miscalculation on their part. In today's filing, linked below, you'll see texts, emails, and testimony from people who witnessed and experienced the board's illegal conduct firsthand. You'll see evidence that this was not a misunderstanding, not mismanagement, and not a business disagreement. It was a coordinated abuse of power. The court also rejected the defendant's attempts to evade accountability by attacking standing. Defendants argue that Mr. Sharif cannot pursue any derivative claims. Again, I am not persuaded. I think that's straightforward, right? Even though he resigned as CEO, he has what, 4 to 5% of equity in the company, so he could still pursue a derivative lawsuit. And I think this was acknowledged by other people in the past like 3 weeks, right? And again, he's still only citing the March hearing. What about the April 2nd hearing, where he lost, right? Like, it's interesting. And the court recognized the seriousness of the board's exposure. Mr. Sharif's particularized allegations, including the violating the California Commercial Code with the unlawful Article 9 sale, creates reasonable doubt as to whether a majority of the Intrepid board faces a substantial likelihood of liability for failing to act in the face of a known duty to act. Okay, that matters. Because this fight is no longer happening behind closed doors. It is now happening in a forum where evidence matters, lies are tested, and accountability can be imposed. As founder of Intrepid and the original creator of Ashes of Creation, I also personally want to say that I am sorry. Okay. All right, sure. I took on people who represented that they wanted to help build Ashes and support its future. I did not know they would ultimately try to destroy it and seize it for themselves. But hear me clearly, I will not let that be the ending of this story. We are going to continue putting facts on the record. We're going to continue exposing every lie. We're going to pursue full accountability for the damages done to the Intrepid, its employees, its creditors, its shareholders, and its community, which are vast. And we're going to fight like hell to ensure Ashes of Creation reaches the hands of the people who waited for it for so long, from the hands of those who built it, believe in it, and intend to deliver on its promise, not from those who tried to steal it. To everyone who has reached out to me and to the members of the team during these last months, thank you. Your support has mattered more than you know. Truly it has. In diligence and hope, Stephen Sharif. As I have followed discussions across public forums, I've seen a significant amount of misinformation circulating, orchestrated by Jason Karamanis and his mouthpiece. Just say my name. What's wrong with saying my name? I'm gonna make a statement here because I'm just like, we all know who you're talking about. We all saw the statement you issued through Kotaku, Stephen. 1. For the last 10 years, you claimed there was no board to answer to. When did that change? Was there always a board? Were you lying? No, I did not lie. What? I'm sorry. That just like bursted out of me involuntarily. Hold on. Let me read the question one more time. Maybe I misread. For the last 10 years, you claimed there was no board to answer to. When did that change? Was there always a board? Were you lying? No, I did not lie. Okay. From 2015 through approximately July of 2024. Really? Okay. The board consisted of 100% of the company's shareholders and myself, John and Tom. John Moore being his husband, Tom being Tom Alkazan, Stephen's friend. That structure was founder-led, stable, and consistent for nearly a decade. I'm so confused. Okay. What changed in 2024 was not a normal governance evolution. It was a forced shift in control, as shown in our court filings in the Sharif versus Dawson et al. Complaint. That shift occurred through a combination of pressure, coercion, and actions that we believe were unlawful. When I spoke publicly over the years, I described Intrepid as founder-led. That was accurate. Sure, you can say that. There was no external controlling board directing the company's decisions. The founders maintained control over the company's direction, strategy, and execution. That situation changed in 2024, and after that, it was fundamentally different from anything that existed prior. It was not something that we voluntarily accepted. Even after the 2024 takeover, it was clear that Dawson and his associates were mainly focused on consolidating control for their benefit, and a shareholders' agreement was executed that preserved creative control over Ashes to myself, and preserved the hiring and firing of team members to myself as well. Later, however, in 2025, Rob and the new board would trample on that contract and exercise their coercive conduct to dictate both creative decisions over the project, including the early access Steam launch, as well as trying to change the price of the game to $100 box price and $20 subscription, despite repeated and sustained protests and debate. So the $20 subscription comes from that the PowerPoint presentation we published. The $100, just the mention of box price also comes from that PowerPoint presentation. So Steven may be telling the truth here in terms of the monetization of the game that the board wanted. Despite the shareholders' agreement, he exercised control over the unlawful firing of the team without pay or benefits legally owed to them. With these final acts, I had no remaining purpose for attempting to keep the peace, and instead was forced to pursue legal remedies as shown in the exhibits of our court filings. Follow-up question: why didn't you inform the community when that change happened? Because at the time, doing so would have triggered immediate consequences from Robert and company that I was trying to avoid. By that point, we were knee-deep in Rob's loan-to-own scheme. It had become clear that pressure was being applied in ways that directly tied my compliant behavior to the stability of the company and the well-being of the team and project. If I did not answer a text message or a phone call within a moment's notice, Rob and the new board would threaten to shut the company down and leave 200 plus families without pay or benefits, as shown in the recent exhibits and text messages. There was a pattern established since 2023. If I did not cooperate, their response was to escalate their financial, operational, or other forms of physical threats and coercion. Going public would have been an act that, based on prior behavior, I believed would accelerate harm to the company and to the employees. They demanded anonymity, as shown through recently filed exhibits, demanding to remain hidden in the background, understandably now reflecting on the gross and illegal misconduct they were orchestrating. Trying to fight them was an effort in futility and ultimately landed me in the hospital with organ failure due to an extreme and sustained hypertensive emergency literally the month following their 2024 takeover, which was the height of their physical threats to me and my loved ones, as well as their sustained, regular coercive acts to destroy the lives of the developers who I considered my family. So we're seeing a repetition of the prior filings that Steven filed with through his lawyers. Initially in federal California court. He talked about the harm to his health. He talked about the stress. He talked about all that, that I think Rob Dawson was physically intimidating him, that Rob Dawson had, like, I guess, stood over him or something and forced him to sign like 35, 40 papers that he didn't know what he was signing. So these are very serious allegations here, and it's true, should be, given some thought here, right? Absolutely. And I'm hoping that these claims are backed up by these exhibits that we will be also going over in the stream. I made the decision under impossible circumstances to try to contain the situation and protect the team for as long as possible, rather than trigger an immediate collapse like we saw the board execute in February. Follow-up question again: why didn't you go to the authorities regarding threats and extortion? This was not something I ignored. I actively discussed my fears for my life and safety with attorneys, family, and trusted advisors, as will be shown in court documents. Okay. And now we have recently discovered we're not the only ones with similar fact patterns and behaviors from Rob and company after having spoken with other parties in lawsuits with Rob. This is his style. What for me was a waking nightmare, for him was wash, rinse, repeat. We understood that going to law enforcement could potentially bring accountability, but we also had to weigh that against the very real risk that doing so would escalate the situation in ways that could result in immediate and severe consequences, either to the company itself or to the individuals involved. So Stephen here is saying, the reason why I didn't go to the authorities is because, one, I definitely feared for my life, and maybe that could have escalated severely. And he was also worried about the company going under or being severely affected if he went to the authorities. That's his reasoning basically right here. And he's also accusing Rob Dawson of doing this with other companies and other parties in the past. That created a situation with no clean outcome, act immediately, and risk triggering the collapse of the company and harm to employees. Or attempt to go along with their demands, try to manage the situation, buy time, and protect the team as long as possible. I chose the latter. That decision came with extreme personal cost, but at the time, I believed it was the path that gave the team and the project the best chance of survival. The evidence shown in my most recent filings, both through witness testimony and contemporaneous texts and emails, is not even a fraction of their unlawful conduct and the threats, the discussions around them, and the constraints we were operating under. The board, through their agent, Jason Karamanis, claims you didn't finance the project. Who's asking these questions? So I guess he made these questions in anticipating these would be the questions I or others would ask. Actually, yeah, I would probably have asked these follow-up questions if he had said all this, but I would have also asked a bunch of other questions, for sure. I don't know if that's going to be covered in this statement, by the way. The board through their agent, Jason Karamanis, claims you didn't finance the project and misappropriated funds. Can you address that? That claim is completely false, and it is contradicted by the record. Over the life of the project, we invested millions of dollars of our own capital, personally guaranteed the loans financing Intrepid, used our equity in Intrepid to obtain additional convertible debt, extended millions in personal credit to support ongoing operating expenses over nearly a decade. This was not passive involvement, it was continuous financial support and personal risk. We put everything we had on the line to bring this project to life, and we took care of our team as if they were our own family.
Nephis, yo bitch ass, you're next.
And in many ways they were, and not in some corpo speak bullshit. We love the studio and community we built together. The timing of their claims is also telling. Let's think about this critically. Okay, let's think critically, for sure. When I resigned on January 19th, the board immediately asked me to return and made offers that included doubling my equity incentives. See conditions, emails, and texts on January 23rd. Would this explain why he was still posting on the subreddit? With Teresa exhibits in today's filing. Those offers were contingent on my ongoing cooperation to proceed with their unlawful activity. It became apparent to me that during those negotiations to return, the board was engaged in buying time and attempting to complete their unlawful theft of the Steam funds to TFE. And even despite my resignation, I tried my best to protect the people I cared about, my team. I told the board to contact the bank and inform them to preserve health insurance and 401k obligations and not to terminate employees without pay. I worked behind the scenes with the leaders that remained to try and blunt the board's impact to the team with their illegal pursuits. When I refused, specifically because I would not support their plan to terminate employees without pay and proceed with the actions I believe were unlawful, the narrative changed. Only then did they begin asserting that I had mismanaged or misappropriated funds, despite having conducted an audit months earlier without those representations. There are emails, text messages, and witness accounts in our recent filings today showing their actions as plain as day. They conspired to paint me publicly in a false and misleading light as the reason for the collapse of Intrepid, which is directly contradicted by the evidence now submitted in federal court, while simultaneously filing false statements of information with the Secretary of State to conceal their identities. It does not logically make sense that I was both responsible for the company's financial collapse and simultaneously someone they urgently wanted back to lead the company just days before they shut it down. Those two positions cannot both be true. Some critical thinking here is required. It is also important to note, as evidence in today's court filings, this is their modus operandi, as shown in concurrent litigation by completely separate parties alleging near identical patterns of behaviors by the same parties, the most recent having been filed last month in Florida State Court. Very interesting. I think maybe they won in the back because he was the face of the company, but also they may have found things while he was gone, or were fighting things while they were there. I don't know. I think in that sense it could be true, but that's like conjecture. That's like speculation, right? Okay, more questions. More questions for the Q&A for Steven. Why couldn't an agreement be reached? Why was the company shut down? Because the underlying issue was not a business disagreement. It was a fundamental disagreement over their efforts to conduct an illegal foreclosure and abscond with the valuable trade secrets of Intrepid for their own benefit, while leaving 200 plus families and other creditors and investors in the dust. The board was intent on proceeding with actions that I believed violated California wage laws, violated Warren Act requirements, involved concealing material actions from the senior secured lender Commerce West, while attempting to take control of company assets, including funds held through Steam. These were actions that carried real, legal, and ethical consequences that, despite my best possible efforts, I was unable to dissuade the board from pursuing. As CEO and a board member, I had fiduciary duties to the company, to its employees, to its creditors, and to its shareholders. I could not participate in actions that I believed breached those duties. When the situation escalated from internal financial disputes to actions that would directly harm employees by terminating them without wages, benefits, 401k contributions, or healthcare, and commit bank fraud with a federally backed loan, at that point an agreement was no longer possible. Steven, why did you resign? Because it was the only meaningful leverage I had left. By that stage, I had already pushed back for months on multiple issues, both financial and strategic. Those efforts did nothing to change the direction the board was taking. They had already succeeded in taking over. Their scheme had worked and I found myself powerless. What was the scheme, though? Just buying up equity and becoming the majority shareholder? I'm just trying to understand this. When it became clear that they intended to proceed regardless, I had two options. Remain in place and be associated with those decisions, or remove myself and refuse to legitimize them. Okay, fair, sure. I chose to resign, and since then I've decided to pour my heart, soul, and what remaining capital I can to what remaining capital I could muster to the pursuit of justice, not just for myself, but for my developers and the community who spent the last 10 years in pursuit of bringing Ashes to life. Well, I'm included in that community, by the way, so why did I get banned? Sorry, I just had to sneak that in there. I also understood that the project depended heavily on the existing leadership team. Several senior leaders and I stepping away would materially impact their ability to continue executing the plan they had in place. My hope was that with this final die cast, they would have had no other choice than to back down from their unlawful actions. But I underestimated how far they would go. It was not a decision I took lightly, but given the circumstances, it was the only course of action that aligned with my responsibilities and my values. Okay. Why did you approve the Steam Early Access launch, and why did you say this company wasn't out of money? Sure, that's a valid question, actually. Because based on the information I was given at the time, the company was not out of money. Oh, okay. After control shifted, my visibility to the company's finances was kept on a need-to-know basis. Company banking was directed and routed to Rob's personally owned bank, Pathway, in Nebraska. That's kind of an affirmation, by the way. That's confirmation of the general ledger being legitimate in some ways, right? I think we had a bank account there towards the end that was called Pathway, receiving deposits, presumably, from PayPal and the Ashes website or whatever. And then that Pathway account depositing into the general, just basically making a record on the general ledger, right? So this is, again, a key detail that Steven's putting in here that essentially confirms what we are seeing in the general ledger that we published as accurate. So why is the publication of the general ledger being labeled as defamatory or not real? This is interesting, you know? I think this is very interesting. Key financial decisions and communications were centralized, and much of the information came through Rob and his goon, Ryan Ogden. Okay. All right, Ryan. While there were ongoing discussions about cash flow constraints, those were consistently followed by direct assurances, often communicated verbally and in direct contradiction of the preceding text exchange just moments earlier, that funding through completion had been secured to the tune of more than $12 million in operating funds, not including expected Steam revenues. As late as January, it was represented to me and multiple team leads at approximately $12 million in cash. Hey, again, kind of confirming that, yet again, the PowerPoint presentation is real or is legitimate, would be available as of February 1st, as shown in our recent filings today. Creditors were told on a January 14th call that the company had sufficient funding to reach a September 2026 MVP launch, as cited from 3 separate witness declarations by other creditors and investors in today's filing. Based on those representations, there was no indication that the company was facing an immediate shutdown. The decision to close the company came after I and other senior leaders refused to participate in their plan and resigned, as shown in the text exchange exhibited in today's court filings on January 23rd, stating that unless I agreed to return and participate in their unlawful activity, they would put the company on ice. The explanation that the shutdown was caused by Steam funds being frozen does not align with internal communications and timelines, which are now available exhibits in our federal court filings. That's going to be really interesting to see. They did not expect that I would challenge their actions as aggressively and successfully as I have. They were wrong. I hope this post and the documents below help to provide some answers for those interested in knowing and seeing the truth. Screenshots and pictures have surfaced after we published the general ledger, and it's purportedly from the Ashes Creation official Discord server, and it's just pictures that might corroborate some of the expenses that we see maybe in the general ledger that we kind of just reviewed. And it's like pictures of food, and I think that's definitely a chef plate just from the way it's like plated. I'm like, most people don't plate their food like that. I'm pretty sure a chef did it, or someone who has culinary experience. They plated that. Looks okay. I mean, oh, it looks okay. Look at that. Look at that plating. That shrimp. The size of that shrimp. All right. So anyway, there's more. It could have been made by a personal chef. There's a video of somebody cutting into it. Someone with an apron. Is that the personal? Is that the private chef? Who knows? And then there's like a screenshot of. So a lot of people are like, well, the DoorDash was for workers or business expenses or something like that. And I guess someone dug up a picture or screenshot of Steven saying, "Okay, help me decide for DoorDash." Oh hey. Oh, that's May 27th though. Oh, is that just like charged after? $140.96. I can't believe somebody traced the ledger transaction to the food. Okay, I guess it's another kind of confirmation of the ledger being accurate or being legitimate. I don't know. Damn, they closed. What the fuck? Is that New Year's Eve? Don't order Wendy's on New Year's Eve. Come on. And this is, I guess, pictures of the, trying to link to the alleged payments or transactions made towards Game Empire or Alan Pyle for, Warhammer miniatures. I think it's Age of Sigmar or Warhammer Fantasy. Not 40k. I prefer 40k. Actually, there's another miniature. Oh, look at that. That is really well done, guys. Actually, if you've ever tried to paint miniatures, that's actually pretty well done. And then there's like a picture of him with a strawberry shake driving a Rolls Royce, it seems like, based on the logo on the steering wheel. Oh, yeah, I think this is the golden spoon set of General William Tecumseh Sherman, purportedly, that a couple sources have told me about. So, that's cool. and some historical memorabilia. If you couldn't think things could get worse somehow in this legal mess, apparently the law firm representing Dawson notified the opposing law firm, sorry about Gerd barking, that the money that Steven is using to pay his lawyers might be money that belongs to Intrepid. I was like, there's no way. There's no way this could get worse. But it did. Again. So let me read this. And it's included in one of the declarations. Dear Miss Garman, Garman being one of the lawyers that's representing Steven from Withers. As you know, this firm represents Rob Dawson, as well as TFE Games Holdings LLC, in the Sharif litigation. We write today regarding the likelihood that Withers is currently being paid or has received payments, either in the form of any retainers or otherwise, for its services in the Sharif litigation with funds stolen or converted from Intrepid Studios Incorporated, which funds are subject to liens of Mr. Dawson and TFE. We therefore demand that Withers immediately provide documentation showing the accounts from which it has been paid for its services in the Sharif litigation, including proof of account ownership and/or signing authority. Withers is also hereby notified that Dawson and TFE will be seeking to disgorge any money found to have been wrongfully paid to Withers by Sharif or by his husband, John Moore. And they list, their evidence, like saying, hey, on or about March 23rd, 2022, Dawson agreed to give $8 million, blah, blah, blah. There was an agreement. There was a potential conversion of funds by Withers. Sharif has not been a director or officer of Intrepid at any time during this whole litigation process. He's not authorized by Intrepid to use company assets to fund the litigation. We have reason to believe that Sharif has nonetheless utilized Intrepid accounts to pay Withers to prosecute the Sharif litigation. If this is correct, it would establish a claim for conversion against not only Sharif, but also Withers. Now they're threatening action against the law firm at this point. Pretty interesting stuff. It says on December 20th, 2022, Riot Games chief financial officer sent an initial proposal for Riot to potentially acquire Intrepid, contemplating a total Riot investment of approximately $250 to $500 million. A true and correct copy of which is attached here to as Exhibit 3. Mr. Rob Dawson advised me against accepting the offer by Riot Games. And there's a transcription of a voicemail from Rob Dawson to Steven. Interesting. And then beginning shortly after Riot offered in early 2023, Mr. Dawson began extending a series of additional loans to the company through convertible promissory notes. And this is where Rob Dawson was trying, I guess, not outright, trying to subtly take over the company. We actually have a comment from Trindamir of Riot Games saying, regarding the Ashes of Creation Riot rumors, shout out to subreddit MMORPG, we looked at making an investment or even acquiring Intrepid a few years ago, but Riot decided not to move forward with discussions. The team there shared our goal of making the next great MMO, something we're more committed to than ever, but combining efforts ultimately didn't make sense for us. So I don't know if they were... So I'm kind of curious at what stage they were in the business deal. Were they just like saying, hey, let's talk about it? Can we take a look at the books? Can we take a look at what you're doing to justify this $250 to $500 million, cost? It's kind of curious. I'm really curious about the exhibit. I really want to look at it. And the official Ashes server saying, you should have taken the right offer, Steven. Steven replied, reading the filings and exhibits, I wanted to. I was convinced otherwise. Then literally 2 months later, the threats and coercion began. And then another statement by Steven. Thoughts on Dawson potentially torpedoing the Riot deal but pushing for unfavorable terms in the talks that forced him to walk away? Correct, Steven says. I have the utmost respect and admiration for Mark and the team at Riot and have faith they will create something great with their MMO. At the time these discussions happened, I was advised by Rob not to accept their offer and instead to counter with a ridiculous ask. After doing so, the discussions did not move forward. Texts and emails will be brought to light with further court filings as the case proceeds. In retrospect, it is clear that Rob and his associates saw the value of Intrepid and proceeded to use threats and coercion to force a takeover of Intrepid for their own personal gain. I'm sorry that Riot was dragged into this public spectacle and wish your team nothing but success and hope for an awesome game that continues to service the players they so obviously care about. So the story, I guess, Steven's putting out, which could be true or not, is that Riot approached them potentially to acquire Intrepid and to maybe merge their MMO development teams together. Tryndamere says it went as far as, not moving forward with discussions and saying that combining efforts ultimately didn't make sense for us. Very polite speak. Just not sure at what point or what stage the business deal was at. And this is sent to Steven, John, also CC's Tryndamere or Mark Marol, who just made the statement on Twitter, Jake Promengar, Abby Ramprasad, Nicolo Laurent. Hi, Steven and John. Following up on our conversation last week, I'd like to share our initial thinking around the financial component of a potential acquisition of Intrepid by Riot. Okay. It's clear we share a goal of creating and evolving a genre-defining MMO that delights millions of players for decades. With that goal in mind, we would aim to align our incentives, de-risking your investment in AOC in the short term while giving you meaningful upside in the long term. But most importantly, making sure the game has sufficient resources to achieve the vision and outcomes that we're collectively aiming for. Here is our proposed outline. This has been redacted by Steven or Steven's lawyers. Again, not sure why it's redacted. Maybe they don't want Riot to throw a fuss about it. Without these details, though, we aren't sure what the prerequisites were for advancing through this deal, so maybe they just dropped the deal here, or maybe later on when they took a look at Ashes or Intrepid. This represents a total investment of $250 to $500 million by Riot. The Riot money, bro. The Tencent money. Which would further scale post-launch, so they'll even give more money, as we invest in additional Ashes to Creation content and features over time. They should have taken a deal if it was actually a deal, right? I look forward to discussing this on Thursday, and before that, we'll also send over initial answers to your operational questions, how project funding works, standard Riot benefits, what it means to be a Riot. So they were gonna acquire Intrepid Studios and absorb them. Again, I wish we could see what is being redacted here. That would give us more details on exactly what stage this was at. I think this feels like a very introductory email. This is like the follow-up email to the first meeting.